I genuinely believe this is going to change how every Warlock plays Destiny. Yes, Prismatic just came out, and while it does have some insane build potential, I don't think anything can even come close to what this can provide. When looking at everything, it has crazy synergies, and it reminds me a lot of our old Polaris Lance build that we had last season. This is going to be the second version of Infinite Ignitions, and it does exactly as the name says. This build is a ton of fun, and there's a lot going into it, so be sure to stick around to the end so you can learn everything. And if you all enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and dropping a like. The support really does go a long way, and I truly appreciate it. But without further ado, let's jump into probably the #1 Warlock build you can play right now. All right, starting off, I think we first need to talk about how ignitions are going to work in this build. We have a brand new artifact perk called Solar Fulmination. Your ignitions do increase damage and an increased radius. So on paper, this artifact perk seems very easy to understand. You get more damage and you get more radius on your ignitions. And while yes, that is true, it also has another benefit to where it sort of applies a second ignition. And this quote-unquote second ignition will actually increase your base damage of the ignition by 25%, but it's going to further play into some of our fragments that will synergize extremely well with it. And that first fragment is actually going to be Ember of Char, so your solar ignition spreads Scorch to affected targets. So now when you ignite an enemy, you're actually going to apply 40 Scorch stacks if any enemy is hit with that ignition. The cool part about Solar Fulmination is that second ignition can also apply Scorch. So what that means is now whenever you ignite a single target, not only are you getting that increased damage, but you're applying 2 forms of Scorch, and that second form will work the exact same way with Ember Char as the first ignition. So what that means is you're applying 40 Scorch from the initial ignition, and then from the secondary one from the artifact perk, you're applying an additional 40, and you're reading 80 Scorch stacks. And since we're at 80 Scorch stacks, that's where our next fragment is going to come into play, and that is Ember of Ashes. So you apply more Scorch stacks to targets. This is going to increase your Scorch everywhere in the build, but the main thing is on those Ember of Char ignitions, it's now going to actually provide you 60 Scorch. So on both ignitions, that's going to equal 120 Scorch, so you will always cause an ignite. Essentially what that means, and as you've seen from the gameplay, every single time you ignite an enemy, if that ignite hits another enemy, they will then ignite, and it can cause this chain reaction of infinite ignites if there are enough enemies in proximity. In lower tier play, you're not going to be able to take advantage of this as much because normally the ignite can just insta-kill everything, but in things like GMs, or just harder content, master, or even expert, these ignites can literally go on for days, and if there's 2 tanky targets back to back, the ignites can chain off of each other, and it's just this constant explosion over and over again. I can't even describe to you all just how broken this is, but it is 100% something you want to play around with. If you enjoyed Polaris Lance last season, it pretty much is that turned up to 11, and of course everything else in our build is going to help play into that playstyle. So for gear with this build, as you've all seen from the gameplay, Dragon's Breath is going to be a major part of this. This thing is absolutely disgusting paired with this build. You can basically just shoot this in a group of adds. It's going to constantly ignite enemies, and this will of course proc everything else that we just went over. And this is also very good for boss damage as well. This is going to pair great with our super, it's going to pair great with our special weapon, and it's just going to be passive damage, passive ad clear, and you're pretty much going to always have ammo for this thing. And now our next exotic is actually going to be Daunt Course. So this has the exotic perk Rites of Ember. Your Daybreak projectiles deal more damage and scorch targets on impact. Your Scorch is improved, and you gain a small amount of melee energy when your Scorch damages a target. So the Daybreak part of this exotic we're actually not going to be taking advantage of because we're going to be running Song of Flame. We'll talk more about this a little bit later. But the other part of this exotic is that your Scorch is actually going to deal more damage, and then every single time you have Scorch on enemy, you will get melee energy. Both of these are very strong. Adding extra Scorch damage is obviously very good for just doing more damage, and on top of that, getting your melee back faster is also going to be very good because your melee is going to be a very strong thing to proc ignites as well. And then for the final things for your equipment, you're going to want to run a solar sniper rifle because we're going to be taking advantage of incendiary rifle rounds and sniper's meditation. With sniper's meditation, we're actually going to get increased damage every time we deal damage with our sniper, and then with incendiary rifle rounds, we're going to be able to apply Scorch whenever we land a precision hit with our sniper. This is going to be very good because again, Scorch is going to be doing increased damage, and we're also going to be able to ignite enemies because with Ember of Ashes equipped, it is going to take 3 sniper rifle shots to actually proc and ignite. I can't stress just how strong this is. Not only is it good just for doing extra boss damage, it's also good on things like champions to just tank your targets because you can hit 3 headshots, proc and ignite, and then once again, everything else that we went over at the beginning of the video, you're going to start chaining ignite. So you don't even have to have Dragon's Breath to start igniting enemies. You can just land 3 precision shots on a single target, which is very easy to do on something like a GM, and you're going to start igniting enemies everywhere. And the other little cherry on top of a solar sniper rifle is going to to be anti-barrier sniper. Now the sniper can actually stun barrier champions, but it can also shoot through shields. Any shield, a Hydra shield, a Cabal shield, you can just shoot right through it, which is very, very cool. And this also is going to allow us to have the opportunity to deal with all three champions, because we're also going to be running a hand cannon, which is Overload hand cannon this season. And I would highly recommend any hand cannon that can get shoot loot, because this is going to be a very strong form of your survivability. You can shoot ammo from across the map. You can pick orbs up, which are going to play into our armor mods. And also pairing that with explosive payload is great because you don't really have to aim for it. You can just shoot the ground and it will pick it up from the AoE radius. So with all that, your hand cannon's overload, your sniper's anti-barrier, and every single ignition you do is actually going to stun unstoppable champions. So you could take this loadout into literally anything and it will have you covered. But now let's move on to the subclass to talk about how this is going to round everything out as well. First up, we're going to be running Hellion. So activate your class ability to summon a solar mortar that lobs flaming projectiles at distant targets. Targets damaged by the mortar are scorched. Hellion's actually very, very strong with this build. You're going to be able to use your class ability all the time, so you're going to have a permanent Hellion by your side. As it read, you're going to be doing scorch damage, so this is already going to be improved with Dawn Chorus, so you're essentially just making this do more damage. But on top of that, since you are applying scorch, this can lead to ignites. This is just another form of igniting enemies, which can then proc everything else we've already went over in the video. Hellion is very strong for ad clear, and it's also just very strong for dealing additional boss damage. You always want to make sure you have one by your side at all times in any circumstance. And now our next aspect is actually going to be Touch of Flames. This is just going to buff our grenades. We're going to be running the Fusion Grenade because this does a ton of damage, and with Touch of Flame, it will make our Fusion Grenade explode twice. Fusion Grenades with Touch of Flame is actually going to apply 60 Scorch stacks, so you apply a hefty amount of Scorch stacks, which again makes it easier to lead ignites from other things in the build, say something like your Hellion. But on top of that, since it is doing double ignitions, this can do a ton of damage. So in any boss scenario, you could start off throwing one of these to apply Scorch, do a ton of damage, or if you run out of your super, you can throw that after your super ends. It is very, very strong. And then for our melee, as I did mention, this is going to be a very hefty part of ignitions. We're going to be running the Incinerator Snap. The way this works is that if you snap the ground in front of you, if all the sparks that come out from your Incinerator Snap actually hit an enemy, it can cause an ignite. With Ember of Ashes, this just makes it extremely easy because you're going to be applying more Scorch stacks with those sparks. And once you get the rhythm of this down, I can't even describe to you just how easy it is to ignite enemies. If you want to run Celestial Fire, you can, but I cannot stress enough just how strong this is, because since you basically have a guaranteed ignite anytime you want it, especially at close range, since your sniper can kind of deal with long range ignites and Dragon's Breath as well, this being the close range ignite that can proc again everything else we've already went in the video is just super, super strong. And again, we're going to be able to spam these. Now for our class ability, I do like to run Phoenix Dive just because it has a lower cooldown. It can apply cure to yourself. This is great just so you can have your Hellion up a lot more often with that lower cooldown. Then for your super, I like to run Song of Flame. Yes, our exotic is going to pair well with Daybreak, and yes, it can do good damage, but in all honesty, Song of Flame is just so strong. Even paired with Dawn Chorus, I think it's still a little bit better. I've done testing. I've shot Dragon's Breath on a boss, and then I've popped Dawn Chorus, and it ends up doing less damage than if I were just to use Song of Flame and just shoot Dragon's Breath over and over again, because remember, with Dragon's Breath, every single time you ignite an enemy, it will actually reload the gun. So you can sit here, spam your abilities with Song of Flame, shoot Dragon's Breath every single time that you get an ignite, and you're literally just igniting things like crazy, and you're getting that increased damage from the artifact perk as well. On top of that, Song of Flame's also disgustingly strong for ad clear. You get 90% damage reduction, and it also is extremely easy to ignite enemies with the abilities that it provides. And again, those ignites can then start chain reactions to kill everything in the room. It is ridiculously strong. And then for the final two fragments, first off, we're going to be running Ember of Singeing, so your class ability recharges faster when you scorch targets. This is great because again, everything in the build scorching. Even Hellion itself is scorching, so you use your class ability to get a Hellion. The Hellion's going to scorch. You're then going to proc Ember of Singeing to get your Phoenix Dive back a lot faster, so you can have a permanent uptime of Hellion. It is very, very good. And then for our final fragment, it's just going to be Ember of Searing. So defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. This is great because again, our enemy is going to be scorched with everything in the build. We're going to get melee energy. This will then pair with Dawn Chorus, also providing us melee energy while we're scorching the targets. So scorching the targets gets us melee, killing the scorched targets gets us melee. And we're also making fire sprites. And if you don't know, when you pick a fire sprite up, you actually get grenade energy back. So this is just a further way to spam out grenades. So with all this combined together, your class ability and your melee is literally always going to be spammable, and your grenade is going to be almost spammable with the setup, but we're going to play further into armor mods to help improve that as well. But let's take a look at the remaining artifact perks. We've already went over most of them, but we also are going to be running Radiant Orb. So if we pick an orb up, we can get Radiant. This is going to be great because we will have shoot loot to shoot an orb from a mile away. That will give us Radiant. On top of that, Shield Crush. Now if we have Radiant, we will get increased grenade recharge rate. This is going to be great because again, as we already mentioned, everything else is going to be spammable. Now Fusion Grenades we're just going to get that energy back a lot faster. Also running counter energy, so if we stun a champion, we get a big chunk of ability energy back to our lowest ability. Since literally our entire build can stun, you just are always going to proc this, you never have to worry about it. And then finally, elemental siphon. So whenever we get rapid elemental kills that matches our super, we will actually make elemental pickup. So this is just another way to make more fire sprites. With Dragon's Breath, it already makes fire sprites with its catalyst, and then on top of that, you're now making even more with elemental siphon. And again, all those fire sprites can help you get more grenade energy. And then for stats, I do like to go 100 resilience just to get 30% damage reduction, and then I would opt in going 100 strength because you want to spam this melee a lot. I cannot stress just how strong Incinerator Snap is with this build. And then on top of that, go with 100 discipline, put everything else in discipline just so you can spam your grenade a lot more often. As you see, it's a 36-second cooldown with not much playing into it other than fire sprites, and again, some of armor mods will, so you're going to be able to spam your fusion grenade a lot as well. And if you have anything left over, just go in recovery so you can spam your Phoenix Dive a lot more often to keep your health, you know. But now jumping into armor mods, this is what I'm running if you would like to copy them down. But starting off, we're going to be running a harmonic siphon and a stasis siphon. Now I'm running harmonic siphon so I can make orbs of power with my Dragon's Breath and my sniper rifle, and I'm also running a stasis so I can make it with my Vulpecula. Now if you're not running Vulpecula, you can run something maybe like a kinetic siphon if you want to run Midnight Coup or something. I just like having both of these so I can just always make orbs, because again, orbs are going to be very, very strong with this build. It's going to be big on your survivability, and it also grants you Radiant, which can proc things like Shield Crush, so you want as many orbs as possible. So having both siphons for your weapons is very, very good. Now next up is a heavy ammo finder, just so I can make heavy ammo for my Dragon's Breath. You're going to use your Dragon's Breath a lot with this build, so this is great to have. Now if you aren't used to Dragon's Breath as much, or if you just don't want to run Dragon's Breath, you want to run something else, you can opt in to take something like Dynamo, Ash to Assets, or even Hands-On. All these will be very good just to get extra super energy. I don't really think you need these. You already get your super pretty quick with just the amount of damage you're doing, so I like to just take heavy ammo finder just to have more ammo for Dragon's Breath. And again, if you are not running Dragon's Breath, I mean, you still get more heavy for whatever that you're running. Now next up for our arms, we're going to be running impact induction and focusing strikes. Whenever we cause damage with our power melee, which again we can spam literally all the time, we're going to be getting grenade and class ability energy back. This is very, very strong for this, and it just further plays into the way that we're going to spam some of our abilities. Now our final one is just going to be grenade kickstart. This is going to be able to take advantage of our armor charge. We're going to be able to throw our grenade, get a huge chunk of energy back. And the reason I'm not taking any loader mods is again because I'm running shoot to loot. That will reload the gun itself, but since we are going to be able to pick orbs up, we're pretty much going to always have max armor charge stacks for grenade kickstart, so we're going to be able to spam our grenade a lot with this build too. Now for our chest piece, always go with resistant mods, just be sure to swap these out for whatever content you're going into. And then for our boots, this is going to be strong for our survivability. We're actually going to be running a recuperation and a better already. As you've seen for everything else in the build, it definitely is not the strongest when it comes to survivability. It's more of a glass cannon build, but with these mods and shoot to loot, that kind of counteracts that. So whenever you shoot an orb, you're going to get a huge chunk of health. You get 70 health, and then with better already, you're actually going to start your health regeneration. Now typically this mod's kind of trash because you just pick the orb up, and if you get shot, it already kind of goes away. But since you can be at a long range with shoot to loot, you can then shoot an orb, get that huge chunk of health, and start your health regeneration, and you become very, very tanky. Now for the final mod, I do like to run a solar scavenger so I can get more ammo for my Dragon's Breath and my Kilo sniper rifle. Since you're going to be using these two pretty much all the time, this is just great to have so you always have decent ammo economy. And again, you are also going to be making heavy ammo with your heavy ammo finder mod, so that just further plays into more ammo, pairing that with the scavenger for your Dragon's Breath. Now finally for our class item, I do like to run a bomber, so whenever I use that class ability, I get grenade energy back. Since I can spam my class ability, this is going to be a great way to get our grenade energy back. Like I was saying, all of our armor mods are going to play heavily into getting our grenade back, while our subclass is getting our class ability and melee back. But next up is powerful attraction. So whenever I use my class ability, I can pick up orbs around me. This is again great because we can proc things like grenade kickstart, we can proc radiant, all the things that we can get our health back. Everything in this build, this is just great to have since you can use your class ability a lot anyway. And then finally, I like to run a reaper. So whenever I use my class ability, the next kill I get will actually make an orb. This is great. Again, we can spam our class ability, we can kill the enemy, make an orb, we can use shoot to loot to pick that orb up to play into everything else that we've already went over. And overall, this build is just disgustingly strong. And then finally, for the most important part of the build, this is the transmog I'm running. The theme of this was literally just bird. I tried to put as many feathers on my Warlock as possible. I took advantage of the Dawn Chorus ornament. I think it turned out actually looking pretty sick, and if you want to make your Warlock look like this, definitely be sure to copy it down. Anyway, so that's going to do it all for me. Let me know what y'all think about this build in the comments below. These new artifact perks are very, very strong, and it's what is allowing builds like this to exist. And again, I honestly think this is probably the best Warlock build in the game right now. But that's just my opinion. Again, let me know what you all think, and if you have any questions, definitely be sure to drop them down below as well. But that's going to do it all for me. I wish you all the best of luck of putting this build together for yourself. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Peace.